Hi, my name is Professor Dr. Devaruti Haldar, and in this session, I'm going to discuss about how arrests are made in case of arrest with warrant. In part 1, we have discussed about how arrests are made in case of arrests without warrant. Before going into discussion about how the arrests are made in cases of with warrant, we must understand about the logic behind arrests by police officers. There are several reasons for such kinds of arrests. For example, to compel the accused to be present before the investigating officer for investigation, examination, search, seizure, etc. To compel the accused to be present before the courts during the trial for a fair trial, to prevent the accused from escaping the clutches of law, to prevent the accused from destroying the evidences and influencing the witnesses, which is very common, especially in cases of criminal offenses, to prevent escalation of victimization for the victim and society at large. Now, there are three aspects that we must understand. Arrest with warrant for compelling the presence of the accused. Now here we are getting to see how the accused is compelled to be present before the police and also before the courts. Next is arrest without warrant for cognizable cases. Now we understand that the police has got specific power to go ahead for examination of the witnesses, for investigation, etc., and also for arrest without warrant in cases of cognizable cases, because these are heavier offenses. Next is arrest in cases of non-cognizable cases. In such cases, there are some specific necessities for the police to get some order from the magistrate, or for example they also need to have some kinds of warrant, etc., to go ahead for arrest and also for investigation, etc. While discussing about arrests made with warrant, we should also understand about the compelling of the presence of the witnesses, which may be done by serving of the summons, etc., and compelling the presence of the accused persons, which may necessarily be done by way of arrest with warrant. Section 79 speaks about service of summons of witnesses on witnesses by post. It very clearly says, notwithstanding anything contained in the preceding section of this chapter, a court issuing summons to a witness may, in addition to and simultaneously with the issue of such summons, direct a copy of the summons to be served by the registered post addressed to the witness at the place where he ordinarily resides or carries on business or personally works for gain. Further, it says, when an acknowledgement purporting to be signed by the witness or an endorsement purporting to be made by a postal employee that the witness refused to take the delivery of the summons has been received, the court issuing the summons may declare that the summons has been duly served. What we get to see here, first, the summons are actually provided by the courts. This is something which is completely a judicial function. And second is that how the court may understand that the issuing of the summons has been duly done or the summons has been duly served. Once, even when the witness or the person to whom the summon has actually been taken out, he even writes or he even endorses that he refuses to take the summons, the court will understand that the summons has been duly served. Please note here that I am using the term as has been mentioned in section 69, that when the acknowledgement purporting to be signed by the witness or an endorsement purporting to be made by a postal employee, that the witness refused to take the delivery of the summons. That means even when it is not taken by the witness, then also the section says that the summons may be considered to be duly served. Now, section 61 discusses about form of summons. Here we are going to see the general process of serving summons to the accused person. Again, as we have seen that serving summons or providing the summons, etc., it is a completely judicial activity. This section says every summons issued by a court under this code shall be in writing, in duplicate, signed by the presiding officer of such court or by such other officer as the High Court may from time to time by rule direct, and shall bear the seal of the court. That means until and unless these conditions are already fulfilled, summons may not be considered as a duly signed summons. Section 62 discusses about how the summons are served. It says every summons shall be served by a police officer or subject to such rules as the state government may make in this behalf by an officer of the court issuing it or other public servant, which means that summons must be provided or summons must be issued by the courts, but it must be served by the police officer or any other officer as may be ruled by the state government, the officer of the court. Now, summons shall, if practicable, be served personally on the person summoned by delivering or tendering to him one of the duplicates of the summons, which means that summons, there are two copies. One should be kept with the courts or the police officer, and the other should be delivered to the person to whom the summons is issued, and it should be served personally. The third subclause says every person on whom a summons is so served shall, if so required by the serving officer, sign a receipt therefore on the back of the other duplicate. Now we get to see that the summons must be served personally. The summons can be served by the police officer or any other officer of the court, and every person on whom a summon is so served shall, if so required by the serving officer, sign a receipt thereof on the back of the duplicate. That means he has acknowledged and also he has received the summons. That is the information that should be taken back by the serving officer. Now we are going to discuss about how the summon is served on different persons or different categories of persons. The first is that section 63 discusses about service of summons on corporate bodies and societies. Section 66 discusses about service of summons on the government officers or government servants. Section 67 discusses about service of summons outside the local limits. Section 63 very clearly mentions service of summons on a corporation may be effected by serving it on the secretary, local manager or other principal officer of the corporation or by letter sent by registered post addressed to the chief officer of the Corporation of India, in which case the service shall be deemed to have been effected when the letter would arrive in ordinary course of post. Here, the explanation very clearly mentions the corporation means an incorporated company or other body corporated and includes a society registered under the Societies Registration Act 1860. Now, as we have seen in the previous sections also, summons can be served through post, summons can be served through police officer, summons can be served through any other court official, etc., as has been ruled by the state government, but it must be served also personally. That means the person who is serving the summons must be able to see that it has been endorsed as received by the person to whom the summons has been issued. Or if the person is rejecting the summons, that should also be written on the back of the summons. Section 66 says about service on the government servant. That means summons servicing on the government servant. It says where the person summoned is in the active service of the government, the court issuing the summons shall ordinarily send it in duplicate to the head of the office in which such person is employed, and such head shall thereupon cause the summons to be served in the manner provided by section 62, and shall return it to the court under his signature with the endorsement required by that section. Such signature shall be the evidence of due service. Now here we do get to see a little diversion from how the summons are to be served personally on the persons to whom the summons are issued. In case of government servants, that is service of summons to the government servants, we get to see that the summons are actually to be sent in duplicate to the head of the office. Now, please note that this head of the office may not be the person to whom the summons are going to be served on, or for whom the summons have been taken out. This particular head of the office will be working on behalf of the police or the behalf of the court officer, etc., who is now serving the summons, to give the summons or to provide the summons to the actual person who is employed. And such head, as the section mentions, shall thereupon cause the summons to be served on the manner provided by section 62, and shall return it to the court under his signature with the endorsement required by that section. That means he is now taking down the action of providing the summons to the actual person to whom the summons has been issued, and he is going to serve that summon on that particular person, and he is going to return that particular proof of delivery of the summons to the court. Section 67, on the other hand, speaks about service of summons outside the local limits. Now, the other sections that we have just now seen speaks about service of summons within the local limits. Section 67 discusses about service of summons outside the local limits. It says, when a court desires that summons issued by it shall be served at any place outside its local jurisdiction, it shall ordinarily send the summons in duplicate to a magistrate within whose local jurisdiction the person summoned resides or is to be there served. Now, as we get to see that the police officer or the court officer may not be able to go directly to the other jurisdiction where the person is now staying, that is the person to whom the summons is to be served is staying, but on the contrary, the court should contact the other magistrate who is the magistrate of that particular court within that particular jurisdiction, and that magistrate should serve within his local jurisdiction that particular summon as if he was the magistrate where the original summon has been issued. Further, we also should understand that how the summons are to be served in specific cases. For example, when the persons summoned cannot be found, when service cannot be effected as before provided, because there are specific reasons, etc., where the service of summons cannot be executed due to several reasons. And also we will understand about the proof of service in such cases and when serving officer is not present. First, section 64 deals with service when persons summoned cannot be found. Now, there are lots of criminal cases where the accused person or the witness also may not be found in his home, or may not be found in the general dwelling space or dwelling place, because he may have ran out, he may have absconded, etc. What to be done in such cases? Section 64 says, where the person summoned cannot by the exercise of due diligence be found, the summons may be served on leaving one of the duplicates for him with some adult male member of his family residing with him, and the person with whom the summons is so left shall, if so required by the serving officer, sign a receipt therefore on the back of the other duplicate. Now here we again get to see a little bit diversion, because the other sections have spoken about providing the summons to the actual person to whom the summons should be served, and to getting the acknowledgement or even refusal acknowledgement from that particular person to whom the summons has been issued. But in such case, section 64 says that when the particular person to whom the summons have been issued is not found, who can receive it? Section 64 very clearly mentions adult male. Now this concept has been included in it because in many cases it can be seen that there are children are there, and also there are women are also there, even adult women are also there. Now, why summons may not be served on such persons? Because children are not supposed to receive anything. Children cannot enter into any contract or agreement, etc. And the children may not be included in the criminal justice system until and unless there are typical positions, there are typical activities, etc. to be taken up by the SGPU, etc. In other way, I can say that the children should not be included in the criminal justice system for the mistakes or for the criminal activities done by their parents, done by any of the adult guardians with whom the child is staying. Women may not be able to accept the summon because of the orthodox societal understanding, also because of the Pardanishan women situation. So in this case, section 64 very clearly mentions that it should be left with one of the adult male members who is staying or who is residing with the person to whom the summons should be served, and he is residing in the same place. However, the explanation to this section very clearly mentions a servant is not a member of the family, and therefore if the summons has been accepted or if the summons has been even rejected also by the servant, it should not be considered as the summons has been duly served. Section 65 speaks about procedure when service cannot be effected as before provided. It says, if service cannot by the exercise of due diligence be effected as provided in section 62 or 63 or 64, the serving officer shall affix one of the duplicates of the summons to some conspicuous part of the house or homestead in which the person summoned ordinarily resides, and thereupon the court, after making such inquiries as it thinks fit, may either declare that the summons has been duly served or order fresh service in such manner as it considers proper. Which means that when the person to whom the summons has been issued is not found, when the adult male member who resides with the person to whom the summons has been issued is not found, or when there is no other way to provide it from person to person, that means from officer serving the summons to the person to whom it is issued, is not possible, in such case the serving officer shall affix one of the duplicates of the summons to any of the conspicuous part of the house or homestead where the person summoned generally resides. But the entire process of serving of summons may not be considered as complete until and unless the court, after making such inquiries, is satisfied that why the person could not be served the summons personally and why the serving officer had to affix the summons on the wall or on the part of the homestead, on the property. Now, It also further says that it may either declare that the summons has been duly served, or in such cases where the court is not satisfied, the court may order for a fresh service in such manner as it considers proper. Section 68 speaks about proof of service in such cases and when serving officer not present. Now there are different situations where the serving officer may not be present. What happens at that time and how the proof of service can be accepted, can be established. It says when a summons issued by a court is served outside its local jurisdiction, as we just saw, and that sort of issuing of summons should be done through the other magistrate of the other court. Section 68 says that, and in any case where the officer who has served a summons is not present at the hearing of the case, an affidavit purporting to be made before a magistrate that such summons has been served, and a duplicate of the summons purporting to be endorsed in the manner provided by Section 62 or Section 64 by the person to whom it was delivered or tendered or with whom it was left shall be admissible in evidence, and the statements made therein shall be deemed to be correct unless and until the contrary is proved. The affidavit mentioned in this section may be attached to the duplicate of the summons and returned to the court. That means in such cases the affidavit of the serving officer is needed, and the second thing is that the endorsement on the duplicate summon that it has been received by the actual person to whom the summons has been issued or to any other person who has received the summons, because when the actual person to whom the summons was issued was not present, etc., that must be there and it can be admissible in the courts. Now we are going to discuss about the warrant of arrest. Now what is a warrant of arrest? Generally we will not get to see the definition of warrant of arrest in CRPC, but it may be defined as the order of the court under its seal and signature directing the police officer to go ahead for arresting a particular person for specific reasons, and that particular person may not be arrested when the sureties and the bonds are executed with sureties, etc. Now section 70 discusses about form of warrant of arrest and its duration. It says every warrant of arrest issued by a court under this code shall be in writing, signed by the presiding officer of such court, and shall bear the seal of the court. Every such warrant shall remain in force until it is cancelled by the court which issued it or until it is executed, which means again just like summons, issuing of the warrant is completely a judicial action and it can be issued, it can be executed through issuing of the same by the police officer or any other officer as the state government may rule. Now when can warrant of arrest be issued? In the case of State versus Dawood Ibrahim Kaskar, it is a 1997 case, it was held that even in the course of investigation the warrant of arrest can be issued, and such warrant of issued can be issued before taking the cognizance of the case, and in such cases warrant can be issued and it may be considered as a valid issuing of the warrant. Now there can be different types of warrant. For example, there can be bailable warrant and also there can be non-bailable warrant. Section 71 discusses about power to direct security to be taken in cases of bailable warrant. It says very clearly, any court issuing a warrant for the arrest of any person may in its discretion direct by endorsement on the warrant that if such person executes a bond with sufficient sureties for his attendance before the court at a specified time and thereafter until otherwise directed by the court, the officer to whom the warrant is directed shall take such security and shall release such person from the custody. Now this particular subsection of section 71 very clearly mentions that arrest of warrant may have been issued. The police may start executing the arrest of warrant, but at the same time, feels that there can be a case of releasing the person from the custody of the police officer from arrest, it may suggest that the person may actually execute a bond with sureties for his attendance before the court at a specified time. That means the court is also giving that particular person against whom the arrest warrant has been issued an opportunity to be out of the custody of the police by way of arrest, whereby he executes a bond with sureties for confirming his attendance before the court at a specified time. And if such kind of bond is executed, the police need not arrest the person, but the arrest warrant will be issued, which means this is bailable warrant, and the person to whom the arrest warrant is being issued is now making himself available, and he is not making himself available through the police custody, but because he has executed the bond with sufficient sureties, he himself is making a promise to the court that he will be available for his attendance before the court at a specified time. This section particularly also mentions that the endorsement shall state the number of sureties, the amount in which they and the person for whose arrest the warrant is issued are to be respectively bound, and the time at which he is to attend the court. It also says that the endorsement should include, whenever the security is taken under this section, the officer to whom the warrant is directed shall forward the bond to the court. The officer to whom the warrant is directed cannot just avoid his duties by not forwarding the bond to the court. This particular section actually is meant to prevent the misuse of the powers of the police, whereby the police may go ahead for arresting and also may provide custodial torture. Section 72 discusses about warrants to whom directed. Now, this particular section very clearly mentions that a warrant of arrest shall ordinarily be directed to one or more police officers. These are the persons who are going to execute the warrant. But the court issuing such warrant may, if its immediate execution is necessary, please do understand that if its immediate execution is necessary, that means the arrest warrant has to be executed immediately, may consider that this kind of warrant may be directed to any other person in case the police officer to whom the warrant is to be directed is not present. Now, we have seen that in the CRPC, private persons, private citizens, etc., they may be included in arresting, for executing the duty of arresting the persons, and also for executing the warrant. To them the warrant can be directed, but such private persons may not be able to execute the warrant in their own way. They must follow the court guidelines, they must follow the court directions while executing the arrests, and this must be done only when there is a condition, only when the police officers is not available, and the warrant must be executed immediately. This section further says that when the arrest is directed to more officers or persons than one, it may be executed by all or by any one or more of them. That means if the arrest warrant has been directed to many persons, either all of them can execute the arrest warrant or any one of them can execute the arrest warrant, but it should be executed in a proper fashion. The police officers or the private persons may not be able to, or any person may not be able to execute the warrant in a way he feels that is the best way. Section 73 discusses about non-bailable warrant and how it should be issued, to whom it may be directed, and for whom non-bailable warrant can be issued. It very clearly says the Chief Judicial Magistrate or a magistrate of the first class may direct a warrant to any person within his local jurisdiction for the arrest of any escaped convict, proclaimed offender, or any person who is accused of non-bailable offence and is evading the arrest. As such, this section very clearly mentions when non-bailable warrant can be issued. It should be issued only when there is a person who is an escaped convict, or the person is a proclaimed offender, or any person who is accused of non-bailable offence and he is evading the arrest. Other than these conditions, non-bailable warrant may not be issued. And non-bailable warrant, as section 73 very clearly mentions, may be issued to any person within his local jurisdiction for the arrest of such kinds of persons. Section 73 further mentions that such person shall acknowledge in writing the receipt of the warrant and shall execute it if the person for whose arrest it was issued is in or enters on any land or other property under his charge. So it very clearly says that to whom the non-bailable warrant may be directed. That means the person may be in the charge of the property in which that particular proclaimed offender or escaped convict or the person who is accused of a non-bailable offence and is evading the arrest is entering, and he, that is the person to whom the non-bailable warrant is directed, may execute the warrant in a way to arrest the particular person. It further says, when the person against whom such warrant is issued is arrested, he shall be made over with the warrant to the nearest police officer. That means the person who is arresting, the person who is executing the non-bailable warrant cannot simply make that particular person who has now, who is a convicted offender or who is an escaped convict or the person who is accused of a non-bailable offence, and he cannot keep that particular person under his custody, but he must take that particular person or submit that particular person to the nearest police officer, who shall cause him to be taken before a magistrate having jurisdiction in the case unless security is taken under section 71. Now again, as we have seen in this particular section, there are conditions, specific conditions for issuing the non-bailable warrant. In the case of Inder Mohan Goswami and another versus State of Uttaranchal and others, this is a 2007 case, the conditions for issuing the non-bailable warrant was further set. It says non-bailable warrant normally not to be issued if the presence of the accused could be secured. Further, issuance of non-bailable warrant involves interference with the personal liberty, and hence non-bailable warrant should not be issued until and unless it is of dire necessity. It further says arrest and imprisonment means deprivation of the most precious right of an individual. Therefore, the courts have to be extremely careful before issuing the non-bailable warrants. Further, it also says non-bailable warrant should be issued to bring the person to the court when summons and bailable warrant would be unlikely to have the desired results. That means when the other mechanisms to ensure his presence before the courts actually may not be fruitful, and only in these cases non-bailable warrant may be issued. Section 74 discusses about warrant directed to the police officer. In other section, we have seen that warrant directed to any other person, especially for execution of the non-bailable warrant. Section 74 specifically mentions about warrant directed to the police officer. It very clearly says a warrant directed to any police officer may also be executed by any other police officer whose name is endorsed upon the warrant by the officer to whom it is directed or endorsed. Now we have seen that in many cases that the person to whom or the police officer to whom the duty of going ahead for investigation or for arresting the person may not be possible for that particular person to go ahead with such duties. In such case, there should be a proper category or ranking of the police officer by whom this particular duty can be executed, and that particular name and rank of the police officer must be mentioned by the actual police officer to whom such duties were directed. Section 74 also goes in the same line and says that in case it is directed to any police officer, that can also be executed by any other police officer in whose name the endorsement has been made upon the warrant by the officer to whom it is actually directed or endorsed. Now coming to the question of rights of the arrested persons. Now there are few sections which discusses about the rights of the arrested persons. We will also see that the rights of the arrested persons have been discussed under the case of D.K. Basu versus State of West Bengal. Now this philosophy can also be seen in these sections. For example, section 75, which discusses about notification of substance of warrant. Here it says the police officer or other person executing a warrant of arrest shall notify the substance thereof to the person to be arrested, and if so required shall show him the warrant. That means the person to be arrested must not be arrested until and unless the person has been made to understand what is the charge, why such kinds of warrant has been provided, and what is the necessity for arresting him. Section 76 further discusses that the person arrested to be brought before the court without delay. Now this is a common right that we can see for rights of the arrested persons in case of arrest without warrant and also in case of arrest with warrant. It very clearly says the police officer or other person executing a warrant of arrest shall, subject to the provisions of section 71 as to the security, without unnecessary delay, bring the person arrested before the court before which he is required by law to produce such person, provided that such delay shall not in any case exceed 24 hours, exclusive of the time necessary for the journey from the place of arrest to the magistrate's court. If suppose, for example, there is a delay exceeding 24 hours, the police officer has to actually show why such delay had happened. Section 80 discusses about the procedure of arrest of person against whom warrant is issued. It very clearly says when a warrant of arrest is executed outside the district in which it was issued, the arrested person must be taken to the executive magistrate, to the district superintendent of police, or to the commissioner of police, unless the court issuing the warrant is within 30 kilometers of the place of arrest, or it is nearer to the executive magistrate or to the SP or to the commissioner of police within whose jurisdiction the arrest was made. Thank you.